This is the shocking story of pregnancy involving an American man in his 50s who traveled to the remote steppes of Mongolia, met a tribe there, and encountered 3 Mongolian sisters who, according to custom, needed to conceive a child with an outsider. Before watching the video, please subscribe and like. It helps us a lot. John Miller was an American man entering his early 50s. He had once worked in the finance department of a prosperous mid-sized company, but his marriage had fallen apart long ago, leading him through various hardships. One day, after settling his business affairs, he resolved to see the world before it was too late. While not deeply attached to remaining family, the fact that he had barely ever left the United States his entire life spurred him on even more. After his divorce, his heart was complex and adrift, but it wasn't until he was over 50 that he finally picked up a backpack and left for a foreign country. Initially, he considered Southeast Asia or Europe, but the Mongolian steppes he had seen in a documentary vividly came to mind. A place stretching to the horizon, where people still lived as nomads, a remote land less touched by civilization. John wanted to dive into that landscape. He yearned to feel freedom in an unfamiliar place. An acquaintance had told him that Mongolia, beyond its urban areas, was filled with vast grasslands, deserts, and rugged terrain, making travel difficult. But this only fueled his curiosity. He learned from a Mongolian interpreter he met by chance in an online community that there were still minority tribes with little contact with the outside world in the western or northwestern regions. John Miller arrived in Ulaanbaatar and gradually began moving west. He rented a car to use like his own and familiarized himself with a translator device, a dictionary prepared back home, and at least minimal Mongolian greetings. He anticipated the chances of English working were very low, but figured he'd manage somehow. After spending a few days sightseeing around Ulaanbaatar and adjacent small towns, he ventured further into the remote areas. The further he got from the city, the worse the roads became, and his cell phone signal disappeared. Yet, John felt a greater sense of liberation than anxiety. The busy life back in the States, the pain from his divorce, the gazes of others, all seemed to vanish. Now, only he and the vast land existed. After driving on unpaved roads for several hours, a desolate landscape suddenly unfolded before him. Strong winds blew sand everywhere, and apart from faint mountain ridges in the distance, there was no sign of a village. He had brought a certain amount of food, water, and fuel, but there was no telling when or where a village might appear. A slight fear flickered. What if he became isolated alone in the middle of the steppe? But he knew from the start this journey was fraught with danger. Wolves or wild dogs roaming the plains, unpredictable weather, getting lost, none of it would be easy. John unfolded his map again inside the car, searching for familiar landmarks, but the rugged scenery obscured everything, making it impossible to even gauge his precise location. On the barren plain, where finding a dropped needle seemed impossible, he trusted his intuition and pressed forward. Driving for another half-day, one afternoon he spotted something like tiny dots in the distance. Looking closer, it seemed to be a small settlement with a few jars clustered together. John was exhausted from the hot sun but felt relieved at the sight. If it was a settlement of Mongolian nomads, he could at least find people, water, and a place to sleep. As he drove closer, he saw about 7 or 8 jars scattered around. Goats or sheep grazed nearby, and a few people glanced his way. John slowly got out of the car and offered a greeting in clumsy Mongolian. Unsure if English would work, he tried that too, but the reaction was slightly awkward. Still, the atmosphere wasn't one of completely chasing away a stranger. A few people approached and gestured for him to come closer. That first evening, through awkward communication, he managed to convey that he was American and traveling. The villagers, seemingly intrigued, offered him mutton and milk tea. Deeply grateful, John offered snacks he had brought and small souvenirs, clumsily expressing his goodwill. The village belonged to a very small tribe. They called themselves the Jauran and said they had been living nomadically around this area for a long time. John found it hard to understand the details, but through a mix of Mongolian with a few English words and mutual gestures, he roughly grasped their existence. There were hardly any young men, mostly children, middle-aged and older women, and the elderly. That night, As he prepared to sleep in a corner of a gur, he wondered, why are there no young men? They might have left for the cities to find work, or perhaps there were other reasons. John didn't dwell on it, assuming it was just the way things were. He still planned to stay only a day or two before moving on. The next morning, when John intended to briefly look around the villagers offered to accompany him. Though language was a barrier, they used hand gestures to indicate they would show him the well, the grazing areas, and other points of interest. Then, in front of one gur, he unexpectedly encountered 3 young women. All appeared to be in their early 20s, much younger than him. They resembled each other but each possessed a distinct charm. The first had thick black hair tied back partially, was tall, and seemed calm. The second had brown hair, a bright, memorable smile, and seemed very outgoing. The third had neatly braided hair and mostly exchanged quiet glances. He later learned they were sisters named Jargal, Ayun, and Naren. A middle-aged village woman seemed to be introducing John to the sisters. When he greeted them, the 3 sisters looked at him with curious expressions and smiled. Ayun, the second sister, uttered a short English word, hello, and John responded, hello, nice to meet you. Laughter broke out between them. It seemed basic greetings were possible, even if fluent English wasn't likely. Naturally, opportunities arose to talk with the sisters. Jargal spoke almost no English, making interpretation difficult, but Ayun helped out a little. She mentioned having encountered English briefly when she went towards Ulaanbaatar as a child. Naren, the youngest, was very shy and hardly spoke, but she would occasionally steal glances at John as if assessing the stranger. That afternoon, John explored nearby pastures with the sisters. They watched villagers herd cattle or sheep beyond the steppe. Ayun, mixing in simple English, explained life in the village, the scarcity of men, the fact that most young men had left for the outside world, and some of the village's ancient traditions. John became curious. Then how do you handle marriage or having children? He asked. Ayun smiled with a subtle expression and said awkwardly, our tribe has a special custom. To continue the family line, sometimes we arrange unions with outside men. The details are, hard to explain yet. Jargal, beside her, muttered something to her sisters in Mongolian and then gave John a shy smile. At that moment, John felt a slight chill run down his spine. This was something unusual. A custom of having unions with outside men to bear children? And here were 3 sisters, in a village with almost no young men. A ludicrous thought crossed his mind, could they possibly be intending to ask the same of him? But he dismissed it as a mere joke. Surely such a thing wouldn't actually happen? John's original plan was to leave the village within a day or 2 and head further west. However, the villagers showed him hospitality, and as his conversations with Ayun slowly improved, he wanted to learn more intriguing stories. So, he decided to stay a few more days, check his car, and conserve supplies. Besides, the steppe weather was unpredictable, making it wise to rest for a while. Several days passed. John grew closer to the 3 sisters. All 3 were unmarried and were among the most hopeful of the young women remaining in their lineage. Jargal, the eldest, was responsible and diligently carried out tasks assigned by the elders, like managing livestock and household chores. The lively Ayun was curious about outside cultures and city life, constantly asking John about America and looking at photos stored on his phone. Naren, the quiet youngest, had a gentle smile and would sometimes ask Ayun to interpret for her in a cute tone. The 3 sisters invited John to their gur or various places in the village daily, having him sit beside them and showing him many things, how to milk horses or goats, the internal structure of a gur, chopping wood, the process of making traditional Mongolian food. Experiencing these for the first time, he watched with fascinated eyes. Jargal's meticulous way of teaching him was particularly impressive. She tried to explain things step by step like an elder sister, and John felt drawn to her calm demeanor. One day, at a simple gathering, numerous village women and some elders were looking at John and bursting into laughter. He didn't know why, but it seemed they were talking about him. Ayun, beside him, smiled and explained, outsider men are rare here. Especially since there are almost no young men, the villagers find you fascinating. John nodded, smiling awkwardly. But then Ayun frankly added, if you agree, you could undergo a special ceremony in our village and have children, stunning John. The meaning of her words hit him instantly, making his heart drop. It was too early to jump to conclusions, but the thought occurred that perhaps all the sisters desired children. A few evenings later, John was invited to the ger where the three sisters stayed. Until then, he had primarily lodged in a ger belonging to a middle-aged couple, but the sisters asked him to have a long conversation in their ger just for that night. Jargal prepared a special soup with ingredients hard to find in the city. The broth, rich with mutton and vegetables, tasted surprisingly good, and John expressed his admiration. After the meal, in the dimly lit ger, the three sisters and John drank warm tea and talked. Ayun acted as the main interpreter. Then, Jargal looked at John with a meaningful gaze and carefully began to speak. The gist of what was conveyed, roughly translated into English by Ayun, was this village has very old traditions specific to each lineage. Because the number of men is critically low, they treat visiting outside men with a degree of favor. If they take a liking to the man, several women, like 3 sisters or 2 sisters, can simultaneously form a union with him to bear children. If the man wishes, he can stay with the tribe, or he can leave, it doesn't matter. The children are the responsibility of the women and the village community. The man doesn't need to feel burdened by his children remaining in the village. Of course, if he feels a sense of responsibility and stays, the atmosphere is even more welcoming. Hearing this, John found it unbelievable that such a custom truly existed. He had vaguely heard that such things occasionally happened in some remote parts of Mongolia, but experiencing it firsthand felt unreal. Jargal added, the 3 of us are sisters. We have lived without men, and frankly, it's hard for the lineage to continue without young men. This might be burdensome for you, but we would be happy if we could have children together. It was an incredibly bold proposal. Not just one, but all 3 sisters wanted to bear his child. John was flustered, muttering to himself, I'm already in my mid-50s, and in America, this is unthinkable. Besides, can I even handle such responsibility? Ayun overheard him and explained, we don't force things like that here. It's simply a choice. If needed, you could live with us, or you could leave. We've lived like this for a long time. Though he had anticipated something like this, hearing it confirmed was shocking. The 3 sisters watched John with slightly shy faces. Naren quietly lowered her head, her ears seemingly flushed red. All 3 possessed beautiful looks and healthy vitality, and adorned in traditional Mongolian attire, they exuded an exotic charm. That such sisters simultaneously wanted his children, and that it was a permissible custom in the village, it was unbelievable. John sighed, caught in a dilemma where he couldn't refuse outright, yet found it difficult to readily accept. This proposal is too unconventional, he said. Jargal nodded. This isn't an offer we commonly make to outsiders. Actually, long ago, there was an outsider who had a child this way and left, but since then, no men have come for quite a long time. So, we don't want to miss this opportunity either, she stated her intention. Ayun added helpfully, don't feel pressured. If you really don't want to, you can just leave. John thought it over and asked for time. The sisters readily agreed, all right. Stay a bit longer and think about it. However, the village atmosphere already seemed filled with anticipation, as if an outsider man had finally entered their lineage. He got the impression that if he stayed just a few more days, a joining ceremony would naturally take place. His mind was complex. Firstly, he wasn't the type accustomed to casual dating or relationships common in some Western circles. From his American perspective, one man simultaneously having a marriage-like relationship with 3 sisters was absurd, even potentially illegal depending on how it was structured. Furthermore, if children were actually conceived, how would he take responsibility later? It was daunting. Of course, the tribe's stance was that the man could leave, but John agonized over whether it was right to abandon children he fathered. On the other hand, completely rejecting it was difficult given his own situation. Returning to the States, he had no strong connections, no stable job or assets. If he settled here and started a new life, adapting to the Mongolian language and lifestyle wouldn't be easy, but the unique option of living freely on the steppe and building a family was possible. The three sisters were beautiful and showed him favor. John had already spent time with them daily and had inwardly developed feelings for them. One night, Jargal quietly visited the gur where he was staying. Everyone else was asleep. Jargal seemed somewhat stern during the day, but was surprisingly frank when talking quietly at night. "I know you're in your 50s, she said calmly. "But that doesn't matter in this village. There have been women who joined with older men. What we need are healthy children to continue the lineage, and trust with the man. Are you really okay with it?" John asked back. "I'm older, and my body might not be as healthy as it used to be." Jargal smiled. "I don't think you lack strength yet." Talking with Jargal late into the night, John felt himself gradually opening his heart. Among the three sisters, Jargal, as the eldest, possessed a prudent and responsible charm. He even imagined collaborating with Jargal to build a life here if he were to stay. In the following days, Ayun approached John more actively. Since Ayun knew some English, she sometimes suggested out of the blue, using simple words, "We can leave together. We could go to the city, or I'd like to visit America." Her curiosity about America was immense. Surprised by her unexpected reaction, John asked, "But could you abandon this village?" Ayun grinned. "Jargal will protect the village, and Naren. I'm not sure yet, but I'm curious about cities and foreign countries too." Naren still spoke little, but when John was near, her face would quickly flush. Then one day, while fetching water, when they were alone, Naren suddenly took John's hand and smiled silently. John's heart pounded. Naren murmured in a small, soft voice, "I like you too." Although no more specific words were exchanged, a thrill ran through his entire body in that brief moment. It felt as if feelings were conveyed without words. John eventually narrowed his options down to two. First, refuse the sisters' request and leave. They said without men, having children was difficult, and the lineage would gradually decline, but he wasn't obligated to take responsibility. Second, respect their custom and undergo the joining ceremony. Afterward, even if children were conceived, the sisters and the village community would raise them, so he wouldn't have to bear the burden, they said. Of course, he could also choose to stay and be with them. Curiosity and a strange attraction kept growing in a corner of his mind. In his 50 years of life, he had never imagined such a thing. In the States, such arrangements were unthinkable and illegal. But here, it was supposedly a natural culture. Moreover, the three sisters were all pure and beautiful. He felt personally drawn to them. Most importantly, John himself was tired of his past corporate life and failed marriage and wanted to find a new life. So, could this be fate? Eventually, through Jargal, he conveyed his decision to the three sisters. "If you truly want this, and I can try, I will follow your custom." At his words, the sisters rejoiced, embracing him with teary eyes. It was as if a long-standing wish had been fulfilled. John tried to appear calm outwardly, but his heart pounded inwardly. A thrill, like "what am I doing?" enveloped his body. Immediately afterward, the village elders began preparations. Traditionally, when such joining ceremonies took place for a lineage, it involved a simple festival with shared food, traditional music, and sometimes dancing. This case was slightly unusual. One man joining with three sisters simultaneously wasn't common. But it also meant he would receive a great welcome from the lineage. One day, a large bonfire was lit in the middle of the steppe. Elders and women representing the lineage stood in a circle, beating drum-like percussion instruments and chanting blessings. About 30 villagers gathered, with John in the center, surrounded by the three sisters. Dressed in outer garments resembling traditional attire, though lacking elaborate decorations, they were colorfully adorned in typical Mongolian hues. The ceremony wasn't long. An elder offered brief congratulations, the sisters bowed lightly to John, and a cup was passed around. John also drank a mouthful of what seemed like traditional village liquor. A heat spread through his stomach. People clapped and laughed brightly, and the drumbeat grew louder. Soon, a simple feast of mutton, bread, and milk tea was served, and some began to dance. After the festival continued until dusk, John moved with the three sisters to a specially prepared gur on one side of the village. Several people had already come and tidied it up neatly. They had created a space spacious enough for three sisters to live with one man. Jargal, her face slightly flushed, said, "Starting today, you will live with us." Ayun laughed, "From now on, we're family." "Isn't it amazing?" Naren quietly nodded, her eyes sparkling. As night deepened, moonlight and lantern light flickered inside the GER. The three sisters sat down next to John in turn. A night unimaginable from his American perspective. Jargal looked at him and said, "We don't strictly adhere to order or rules. Just mutual consideration is needed. We hope for children, but not forcefully." John, nervous yet excited, nodded. Thus began their life together. The first few days were awkward and cautious, but gradually settled down. The three sisters took turns spending the night with John, and sometimes they all chatted together. Jargal felt serious and protective. Ayun had a cheerful and affectionate attitude. Naren was shy but occasionally offered gentle physical contact. For John, each day was filled with heart-pounding anticipation of what might unfold. After about a month of living with the sisters like this, John began actively participating in village work. When the sisters were mobilized for tasks like feeding livestock, gur maintenance, fetching water, or gathering medicinal herbs in the mountains, he joined them. In the process, he often heard jokes from people that he was now practically a son-in-law of their lineage. He also sensed a village atmosphere that accepted him like a brother, regardless of his age. Sometimes, Jargal took John out onto the steppe to practice horseback riding. Riding silently across the steppe, the vast land and sky seemed to merge into one. John recalled his past buried in the urban sprawl back home and thought it was the first time he had felt such a sense of freedom. Jargal leading the horse by the reins beside him looked dependable and cool. Her expression held a quiet pride. Ayun, always cheerful, often asked John, "Don't you have any American food? Show me music videos on your smartphone." Since there was no internet signal in the village, he could only show saved files. Ayun watched the videos with fascination, exclaiming, "I want to wear clothes like that too." John promised, "If you ever get a chance to visit the States, I'll show you," making Ayun's eyes sparkle as she yelled, "Promise." Naren remained quiet. But sometimes, when she and John were alone, she would act subtly affectionate. Especially when helping chop firewood or doing laundry, she would quietly approach and offer a small handkerchief, saying, "It's hard, isn't it? Rest a little." Each time, John felt touched. All three were different, but they were showing him interest and affection. One day, Jargal felt nauseous since morning and dry-heaved. At first, they thought nothing of it, but when it continued for a day or two, she was examined by an elderly village woman. The result was pregnancy. Jargal was shocked, as if struck by lightning, but simultaneously showed a look of relief. Finally, a child. According to the lineage's tradition, this was a very good thing, and Jargal herself had apparently been waiting for the right time to conceive. Jargal affectionately joked to John, "Looks like you've successfully planted your seed." John was stunned, his mind reeling with the thought, "Am I really becoming a father?" He had assumed the chances were low due to his age, but human calculations proved useless before the mysteries of nature. However, that joy was short-lived. A few days later, Ayun reported similar symptoms. Ayun jokingly laughed, "Could I be pregnant too?" But when the elder woman checked, she really was pregnant. Unbelievable. John was speechless. Within just 2 weeks, both Jargal and Ayun were confirmed pregnant. The sisters touched their bellies, embraced each other, and cheered. A great event had occurred for the lineage. Not long after, about a month later, even the youngest, Naren, was confirmed pregnant. All three sisters had conceived consecutively. John couldn't believe it was possible. Despite being in his 50s, he had fathered children with not just one, but all three sisters. "This is a miracle," the sisters tearfully thanked him. The village was in a festive mood. 3 children coming at once. They slaughtered a cow and held a party. The elders rejoiced. It's been a long time since such a prosperous period has come. John felt awkward under the world's attention focused on him, but also felt pride and responsibility. Ultimately, I'm bringing about a significant change to this tribe. In the early stages of pregnancy, all the sisters experienced morning sickness, fatigue, and dizziness. John tried his best to care for them meticulously. He reduced their workload, ensured they had no trouble with meals, and followed prenatal care advice from the village elders. Above all, providing prenatal care for 3 pregnant women simultaneously in a remote village environment, without city hospitals, posed many challenges. However, this place had long-standing know-how in childbirth without external medical aid. There was an optimistic belief that the elderly women, with decades of experience delivering babies, could handle it without major issues. As their bellies gradually grew, the sisters complained of some discomfort but seemed filled with joy. Soon we'll have babies too, the 3 would gather in a circle and talk about it daily. Talking with the 3 sisters every night, John felt complex emotions. Joy and excitement mingled with the persistent question, will I really live here for the rest of my life? The sisters honestly requested, you don't have to stay forever. But once the children are born, it would be good if you could stay with us for a few years. It will be overwhelming to handle alone. When Naren shyly said, you said initially you might leave, but actually, all 3 of us hope you stay in the village, John felt swayed. All right. I promise I definitely won't leave for the time being, he agreed. Several more days passed. Around the time Jargal, Ayun, and Naren were 4 to 5 months along, a natural disaster, like a sandstorm, hit the village. Gears shook, and livestock panicked and ran off. The sisters, heavy with child, had to endure the chaos. John quickly drove his car to move goats and sheep to safety and cleared rocks rolled near the Jers, performing something like a firefighting operation. Thanks to him, they avoided major damage, but the sisters were terrified enough to feel their lives were on the line. That night, all 3 clung to John simultaneously, murmuring, what would we have done without you? John comforted them, I'll protect you. I'll try my best no matter what situation arises. He cherished them even more, knowing each carried his child in her womb. The entire village also clearly showed their reliance on him. Finally, the time for childbirth drew near. First, Jargal, her belly fully grown, felt labor pains. Following simple midwifery practices, the elderly women prepared inside the GR. John's hands and feet trembled with nervousness, but watching Jargal endure immense pain, he felt a desperate urge, isn't there something I can do? Fortunately, the elders with decades of experience guided her well, and after several hours, a lusty baby's cry erupted. Ah, it's born! Jargal, drenched in sweat, hair disheveled, held the baby and smiled faintly. John's eyes also welled up, leaving him speechless. Perhaps memories of childbirth he had witnessed or heard about back home resurfaced, but this was a child born in a completely different environment, with a completely different woman. The infinitely small and mysterious life touched his heart profoundly. A few weeks later, Ayun went through a similar process and gave birth. True to her lively nature, even during labor, she reportedly made people laugh by joking, "Save me. Oh God, I'm dying." She nearly lost all strength as soon as the baby was born but quickly regained consciousness at the sound of the baby's cry. "My baby. I can't believe it." Ayun touched the baby's fingers and shed tears. John, anxiously watching nearby again, almost collapsed from relief when it was safely over. Lastly, the youngest, Naren, gave birth. 3 babies were born over a span of 3 months. Naren, being naturally quiet, didn't make much noise even during labor. Instead, she stifled her cries and shed silent tears. Each time the elders urged, "You need to push harder. Don't cry, push," she followed stoically. And then, at some point, the baby emerged into the world. Naren hugged the child and burst into tears unknowingly. John held her hand tightly, saying, "You did great. You're truly amazing." Ultimately, the three sisters gave birth sequentially, each to her own baby. Though at different times, it was a chain of births occurring within just 3 or 4 months. The village rejoiced with near ecstasy. The birth of 3 babies in such a short period was very rare and signified a prosperous future generation. They celebrated that the lineage's continuity was solidified. John felt both the joy and responsibility of fatherhood simultaneously. Honestly, raising not 1, but 3 babies was an unbelievable reality, but with the sisters cooperating and the village community helping, things proceeded smoothly. He lost sleep to baby cries every dawn, but seeing the children cutely suckling milk made his fatigue vanish. Now, the 3 sisters and John lived together in the same gur, jointly caring for the 3 infants. Since babies woke up crying in rotation at night, the 3 sisters took turns looking after one baby, and sometimes John would hold and soothe 1 or 2. It was a chaotic situation unimaginable in America, but here, where multiple people living in one gur was common and the entire lineage participated in childcare, it was less taxing. Naturally, John also became busy from early morning. While the sisters breastfed the babies, he would go outside the village to chop wood or tend to livestock. When he returned, the sisters would report, "You worked hard. Here's how our babies are doing today." The village elders frequently dropped by to check on the baby's health and praised John. What a truly wonderful man. To work so hard at this age. Ian sometimes hummed American pop songs while putting a baby to sleep. Jargal, mature for her age, planned responsibly even for childcare, worrying about how to procure clothes when they grew bigger or how to obtain milk or formula. Naren would silently gaze at her baby, then sometimes whisper softly to John, "Thank you for giving our lineage these children." Amidst such daily life, John felt reborn. He left behind the divorce, scars, and lethargy from America and built a completely different family in a completely different place. Moreover, with 3 babies simultaneously born from his seed, he had become the center of a large family he had never imagined. Occasionally, he missed civilization. Familiar American food, convenient shower facilities, internet connection, these things came to mind, but seeing the pure smiles of the sisters and children dimmed those longings. Besides, here there was no fierce competition, no money worries, no corporate ladder. Of course, there was hard physical labor and the risk of natural disasters, but there was the warmth of a community living together. Once the babies were somewhat settled and the sisters recovered postpartum, John seriously discussed long-term residence with them. Now that the children are growing, shouldn't we consider city life for education and various aspects? Ian strongly agreed. I want to try living in the city too, and I want to teach the children to read and write. Jargal took a cautious stance. Our village has no school or hospital, so at some point, moving to the city, or at least closer to a town, might be right, she agreed. Naren also nodded slightly. However, the problems were money and legal issues. Even moving within Mongolia, finding a house or room in Ulaanbaatar and covering living expenses would be significant. Furthermore, if they considered the scenario of John going back to the States, complex administrative procedures like birth certificates for the children or visas for the sisters might become obstacles. Jargal shook her head. If you want, I'd like to go abroad with you, but all 3 of us would have to go, right? And 3 children too. John felt it wasn't time to make a final decision yet. First, let the kids grow up a bit more here, until they are old enough to travel easily. Let's discuss specifics again then. I could return to the States and make some preparations, or we could try living in a Mongolian city first, he proposed. The sisters all agreed with his opinion. The village elders also assured them, if it becomes inconvenient for you to raise the children here, you can leave for the city whenever you decide. We'd like you to stay, but we guarantee your freedom. John was slightly moved by their words, but also felt a sense of apology. Would they be okay if I leave someday? But they seemed resilient, having experienced outsiders stopping by, leaving only children behind, long ago. Ultimately, John, the 3 sisters, and the 3 babies continued living as a large family under one roof, participating in the village community life. Around the time the babies turned 1, life became noisy and busy, but watching the sisters take turns caring for them, John felt happy. The peaceful harmony of a family he couldn't achieve in America existed here. Nowadays, he sometimes drove the SUV to near the city or at least to the town clinic for vaccinations. Each time, the sisters and 3 children accompanied him, making the car crowded. At the hospital, the doctor laughed. "Oh, one father with 3 babies at once? How fascinating." Although John's Mongolian was poor, the sisters interpreted, allowing for basic communication. In this way, they gradually interacted with outside civilization too. With 3 babies born in the village, it bustled with energy. The elders were content, saying, "It's been a long time since we heard crying sounds daily. The house feels full." John also reached a stage where he could comfortably share drinks and jokes with some village men. He no longer felt like a traveler staying for just a few days, but like an actual member of the community. Sometimes at night, sitting by the fire in front of the gur and looking up at the stars, John thought, "I am really their husband and these children's father. A life I never expected." When the sisters took turns sitting beside him and talking, his heart felt at ease. Jargal planned prudently, Ayun spoke with bright playfulness, and Naren silently rested her head on his shoulder. These moments accumulated, creating a feeling of warm, communal love. Let's imagine several years pass. The babies grow, take their first steps, and are adored by the village elders like nieces and nephews. Jargal, Ayun, and Naren each try slightly different parenting styles but practice communal childrearing, so hierarchy or jealousy doesn't significantly arise. John strives to fulfill his fatherly role equally for all sisters and children. The scene of the children calling out to their father simultaneously is quite something. There was always a shortage of hands in the village, so John continued to work hard. If goats or horses escaped, he chased them down with the SUV and brought them back. If there was a problem with the well, he went out with a shovel. If heavy rain poured at night, he checked around the girs for safety. There were many inconveniences, but there was also a vast freedom and breathing space he couldn't feel in the dense cities back home. The sisters thanked him, saying they felt secure because of him. Thoughts of city life and America occasionally surfaced. John didn't let go of the idea of someday showing his children the wider world. The sisters were also full of curiosity and wanted to experience city or foreign cultures. Though mentioned several times, they were delaying the decision because the children were still young and needed stable lives. They planned to seriously consider moving to Ulaanbaatar or an American city at some point. Of course, the village elders would be sad then, but John and the sisters decided to prioritize the children's future. Even though born here, the world is wide, and they needed opportunities for diverse education. However, they wouldn't completely abandon this place. They wanted to maintain a connection, like returning later to their roots or visiting during school holidays. Ultimately, this story portrays the journey of a 50-something American man forming a special family with 3 sisters in a remote Mongolian tribe, fathering and raising 3 children. This man experienced divorce and hardship in America but found a completely different form of family in this tribe he encountered by chance. It's socially unconventional and perhaps questionable in terms of feasibility. However, in this fictional tribe, the male population was low, and the custom of uniting with outsiders to have children persisted. Because John respected their culture and voluntarily participated, it led to a conclusion satisfactory to all. From the sisters' perspective, they continued the lineage through an outsider man. It would be best if he stayed, but they were prepared for the community to raise the child well even if he left. All 3 sisters wanted children who shared a sense of community through one father, rather than children with different fathers. John's acceptance after deliberation revitalized the entire village. As the children grow, they might go to America someday, attend school in a Mongolian city, or continue living in this remote place. That choice belongs to the future. What's certain is that in this present moment, they gather as one family inside the gur, laughing, talking, losing sleep to baby cries, yet relying on each other. One night, gazing at the star-filled sky, John thinks, life unfolded like this. I gained the freedom I longed for, new love, and responsibility all at once. With the three sisters beside him despite the harsh wind, and the children sleeping inside the gur, it feels like a sanctuary irreplaceable by anything in the world. The loud, complex civilization seems forgotten far away, and the land and wind of Mongolia embrace him. John, who sometimes felt lost with nowhere to return, now has, at least here, 3 wives and 3 children he can call family. Thinking this strangely warms his heart, bringing new responsibility and hope. This lineage will continue for decades, and this remote land will nurture the children until they become adults. And John himself will find new meaning and happiness through that process. Whether they all eventually leave for the city, go to America, or remain on the steppe forever is yet to be decided. But life always walks unpredictable paths. What matters is the present sincerity and bond. If John, the 3 sisters, and the children are already deeply rooted in each other, the fact that they are family will remain unchanged, no matter where they are or what they do. The 4 seasons flow harshly in remote Mongolia. Winter temperatures can drop to tens of degrees below zero, while summer brings heat and sandstorms. Nomads have adapted and survived within it. Similarly, John, the 3 sisters, and the children may face numerous trials ahead. Children might get sick, financial difficulties might arise, or natural disasters could strike. But they will overcome them by holding hands together, united under the name of family and by the customs and community spirit of this Mongolian tribe. Now, inside the gur, a baby cries, and the sisters busily move to soothe it. John also gets up to help. Ayun calls out, "I'll carry this one today," you comfort Naren's baby, while Jargal says, "I'll prepare the meal." Their interactions are somewhat chaotic but represent the ordinary, warm daily life of a family. It's entirely different from the framework of a normal family in America, but filled with genuine care and affection for one another. Life flows on like this. Beyond the endless Mongolian steppe, the sunset spreads, and at night, twinkling stars cover the entire sky. Beneath it, in a gur lit by a small light, are a 50-something American man once lost in isolation, 3 young sisters burdened with preserving their lineage, and 3 babies just beginning their journey in the world. This seemingly strange family has, in fact, become the most precious connection for each other. The ending is not yet written. This family will likely navigate many stories and choices. But John has realized one thing: life is lived only once, and if one can achieve love and solidarity in any form, that alone is valuable enough. His encounter with the 3 sisters brought him both the freedom he sought and a different kind of responsibility. That in itself was enough to change the latter half of his life. Thus, the unconventional relationship that began with a stranger's visit ultimately brought new vitality to the remote Mongolian region. The sisters succeeded in continuing their lineage by bearing children, and the villagers blessed them. John was accepted as a member of the village and gradually put down roots in this land. And someday, far in the future, even if the children grow up and leave to see the wider world, the affection built by the steppe, the gur, and the 3 sisters will remain unchanged. Perhaps John will visit the United States someday with the children he fathered. People back home might be shocked, exclaiming, "Unbelievable. One man had children with 3 sisters?" But isn't life always an unpredictable adventure? In this moment, stars twinkle on the steppe, and the gur is filled with warm comfort and the sound of family laughter. What more could one ask from life? Thank you for watching today.